All right, hello everyone. My name is Disc, and in this video we're going to talk all about how to maximize the talent Dominate Mind in Mists of Tyrna Scythe. So it's an often undervalued talent. I don't think every season even calls for it, but in this season we definitely have a couple of areas where we can really add some good value to a group if we know how to use it. I think it's a very fun talent. I think it's actually quite hard to do it right. It's very rewarding when you nail it, but it's also very punishing when you miss. So I hope anyone who's interested to try this technique can take away something from this video. But before we get going, just wanted to quickly thank all of the supporters of the channel. It's been really amazing to see how many people support the work I'm doing here. It's been a really interesting journey to add to my WoW career to become kind of an educator. But I love teaching and I love reaching out in the community and love helping those who are interested to learn. And whereas I hope my videos here serve a purpose for anyone who's looking to learn discipline, please go check me out on my Metafy if you're interested in a one-on-one private lesson. I will always stand behind a one-on-one environment being a better place to learn. And Metafy is a website I've been partnered with now for about 1.5 years. It's been a really great tool for me to connect with my students on a little bit deeper of a level. It opens the door for us to kind of pinpoint where you might be having loss, areas where you need improvement. We can go over UI. We can go over rotation. I can do video reviews of your gameplay, and I can also shadow your gameplay. So go check me out over there. I open up all of my UI elements to my students or any supporters of the channel. And like always, I do want to quickly flash the talents up here and show you exactly what we're talking about. So it's this talent here called Dominate Mind. There's really not much to it. The mind control itself lasts for 30 seconds. And the spell has a 30-second cooldown. So that's kind of where the threat comes into play, is there's always a gap between one to the next. And there are some ways we can get around that and kind of give ourselves better odds, which we're going to talk about. But we just have to be very aware, since this acts as a taunt, that we are on top of when one mind control is fading, that we are just really on the ball and making sure we're recasting mind control immediately. And this is the spell we are after. It is called Soul Split from the Dressed Soul Cleaver. It is a 20% debuff for 8 seconds, which is plenty good for boss 1. I think there's an argument to take this mob all the way to maybe Mistcaller, but that is maybe a little bit of overkill. I think definitely using it on boss 1 is where we're going to get a lot of the value, since we have these very brief burn phases, and boss 1 can be a time sink. Very important to get as much out of those phases as possible. So the idea here is we want the Soul Split to apply as soon as the Wrath damaging phase begins. And that's a little bit easier said than done. But here is what our pet bar looks like. I have a weak aura to help me track the duration of the Dominate Mind. I think that's the most, the first thing I wanted to focus on, and probably the most important, is making sure we recapture the mind control after it expires. So we kind of have this mini game we're adding to our gameplay where we have to pay very close attention to when it's expiring. And before it expires, this is kind of what it's all about. We have to use button 3, which I do have keybinds for all of these new buttons. We have to use button 3 to reposition him far away from you. And the idea, there is no global here, so you can do it in between casting even. You want to send him far away from you to give you a buffer to recast your Dominate Mind before he kind of just whacks you and kills you. So it's probably the easiest place to make mistakes, is forgetting this or getting lost in the thick of combat, and he'll be right next to you, come out of mind control, and then boink you. And then the other two keybinds, I basically kind of just look at them as the on and off button. And this is because, so although the Soul Split will keep firing on autocast, we have to make sure we time the Soul Split with the burn phase. So there is a point in combat where we need to set the pet to passive. So at first we can kind of just let him pop off and play the spell as it comes. But as we're approaching the Wrath phase, we have to hit the last button on the bar, which is for passive. And then right on the damage phase beginning, we have to turn it back on with button 4, which is the Soul Split. So I have a keybind for the 3rd button, the 4th button, and the last button. So it's to move the pet, to turn the pet on, to turn the pet off. And that's kind of about it. It's a little bit easier said than done, but with a little bit of practice, I think I just did 3 or 4 miss and I finally got it kind of down pat. But very importantly, we have to move him away from us before we are attacked. And then we also have to get in good practice of turning him off and on to make sure we have the debuff right when we need it. But with all that being said, I got a pretty good example the other day in a 14, so let's go ahead and clip over to the key. All right, here we go. Definitely a big shout out to the team here. They all knew what was up with the strat and throw in a couple of assist spells to help me on the recapture. Not a bad idea to let your team know what you're doing so they can kind of help out. But pretty standard here on open, we want to aim for 1.5 rotations. So what I mean by that is a pet and a rift, followed by just a rift. And we want to time that half rotation on the Embrace Darkness, very important for the coverage. And noticing on the nameplate here, we have that blue bar I brought in. That is indicating the dot has been applied. And something I did want to make note of since my last missed video of how to maximize our burn phase. Very important that we track the timer of the phase when it starts and when it ends, because we want to force the collapse of our Entropic Rift before the phase ends. If it carries over, I would say that's quite a bit of loss. The only other thing we can do to really maximize our toolkit here is enter into the phase with a double Harsh Discipline proc. So I have it using personal defensives and raptures to avoid my penance. And I'm waiting for the dot to apply before I send my huge Dark Reprimand. And the timing there was slightly off. We didn't have any loss, but I do have better timing on the next one. And force the collapse right at the tail end of that phase. It's really important this is something I only learned kind of recently somehow, but the phase doesn't begin immediately. So it's important to track that with your bigwigs and kind of wait for the ding. Okay, so I opened this phase with just a couple of smites to get the pet back. So here's my full rotation. Working in a Radiance during my Rift as always. Sent my pet away for the recapture. Looks like an assist from the tank there. It was a taunt. And this is the last dot I believe I let him apply. So I do time this one better. I send him away and retire him. I put him on passive. Waiting for the damage phase. So listening for the ding. I have a double Harsh Discipline proc. I press the keybind to apply the dot. Fully unload. And force collapsing my Rift before he dies. And that is about it. So definitely not mandatory in lower keys, but I think as you get in higher keys, it is going to be quite a bit of loss if you're not comfortable with this strategy because of how much of a time sink boss 1 is. So in one burn phase, we got the boss sub 30. We 2-phased it overall, which is exactly what you want, and really saved a lot of time. We did the boss under 2.5 minutes, which is excellent. But this is definitely a newer strat for me. If anyone has other thoughts or tips or tricks on how to maximize it, please let me know. But this is just an example of what I've kind of learned in the last week and how I've gone about maximizing it. Your biggest tools are going to be a weak R to track the duration, and then becoming comfortable with your pet's keybinds, mainly sending the pet away from you as a buffer for a recast. But again, with all that being said, thanks for tuning in, thanks for supporting the channel, and until next time, Disc.